Thanks.
Mark, three things that you would not want to see on the day of an exam.
Um, a crow, um, an ambulance, and a my teacher.
Three
Three
things.
How? Three things that a spectacle wearer fears.
Rain, fog, moving from a cold environment into a warm environment.
Three things.
All right. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Muprov Musings. This is episode 83, and the first episode of our Goats series. I'm one of your hosts, Hal Munger, and joining me now on the line is your adventurous host, Julian Bernardo.
Thanks, Hal, for the introduction. And since I am the adventurous host, and all you did tell me was the title of this series, I did go out to the mountains and I've been collecting some livestock that I think are appropriate for this series, unless you had something else in mind, because I do see we have a third person on the Zoom.
Oh, no, Julian. It's all capitals. It's GOATS with the S lowercase.
Then you must be referring to the greatest of all times, aka some of the people that we think are awesome at improv and that we want to talk to then.
Yeah. And who are those people that we're about to have on?
Well, we're going to kick it off with an amazing guest that I think you should introduce, Hal, because you two have been interacting.
All right. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Mark Smith.
Hello both.
Hello.
It always slightly unnerves me when people call me doctor. It's not a term I tend to use unless I'm writing to my local council to get something achieved, because they tend to respond. Why? Who knows? But yeah, thank you so much, you guys, for having me.
Yeah, Mark Smith I met Mark as the director of the Liverpool Improvisational Festival, but he has a career spanning through many different avenues of improv companies, and improv adventures. So a big part of what the series is, we're hoping to understand kind of how people who are really good in improv and able to right now do the improv that they want to do got to where they are. So we'd love to know how you started improv and sort of what that process has been like.
Okay, so I sort of discovered improv through devised theatre practice, which essentially means I used to make up plays. So we'd improvise and then write them down.
Mm-hmm.
That was my starting point, and I didn't really know that that's what I was doing. Improvisation for me was a tool for writing plays and dialogue, because I love scripts, I love plays, but I like really getting under the hood and working out how things function. I've got quite a curious mind in terms of I sort of want to know how things tick. And then once I've worked out how they tick, I break them and then see how I can put them back together. And I think that probably stems from, as a child, I was always curious about stuff. And I use the word stuff in a catch-all term because I'd be kind of going, oh, Grandad, how does this do this? And my granddad was very patient man, very bright, was kind of what I guess a didactic in terms of kind of explaining stuff to me, and I was absorbing all of that. But then I think I have a particular hyper focus, so I will dive into something with both feet. And I kind of go through 7-year phases where this was my thing, literally 7 years. And I kind of then tire of something and then go, oh, what's the next thing that I sort of believe in the sort of listening to the world and the antennas. kind of pick up on stuff, and you kind of go, oh, that's where I'm headed next. So my improv journey started not with learning about rules or learning about this person or that person, although I was aware of Viola Spolin and Keith Johnson through my studies. But I was more interested in kind of making plays, which in a really kind of helpful way is where my work is now kind of emerging, is sort of more theatrical improv, and looking at how theatre can be reincorporated back into improv, because I think there was a sort of divorce at some point in the mid-90s. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I think both, perhaps one art form was kind of, we want to establish ourselves, we are this. For me, improv was never about the sole purpose of comedy. I think comedy, and I think I described this to you, Hal, when we spoke, was comedy's a bit like a really, really, really nervous dog. And if you chase it, it runs away. And if you sort of ignore it, it'll come to you. So I'm kind of quite interested in reclaiming theatricality and theatre in improv. At the same time, I'm fully appreciative of short formers, because I think it's incredibly difficult. Spent 2 years doing it in the early 2000s, and doing gigs every week, and you become really sharp. I do think that it then creates a particular mind map that doesn't allow you to take some time and space. It is, and I guess that's my own fault, is kind of going, it's about being fast, being funny, move on to the next scene. And I found that quite frustrating after a while. The bit that I really liked was we used to play in the second half a game called Fishbowl, which is just a series of suggestions, which then gave you the opportunity to play longer scenes. And that sort of, I kind of went, oh, okay, this is feeling more like theatre to me, but we're making it up. And it felt comfortable in the sense of that's my experience of devising. So those two things were kind of going, I'm doing this and I'm doing this. And so that kind of, we did a few years of that. And then we worked with two amazing people from a company called Burn Manhattan, who were based in New York. And they worked with Shira Pivin, who was the director, and Adam McKay was part of the team, Kevin Pitts, John Thies, and Todd Stashwick. And they were off Broadway. They were doing extremely well. They were doing really, really interesting work. And they sort of kind of created collectively what the term organic improv. So there's no prompts. It's very physical. And we had a sort of this transatlantic exchange of ideas, because there was a local company called Rejects Revenge, who John and Todd had seen at Edinburgh Festival. They were over with Second City doing at the Edinburgh Festival in the early 90s, and they discovered this thing called physical theatre, which is essentially kind of mimic, late mid to late 80s. Britain's kind of economically depressed. There's not much money in the arts. People then went and looked at European practice in terms of theatre making, and kind of having no, very often the seedbed of having no money means that you have to be creative and create. So they were creating really interesting physical comedy with minimal set and using loads of clown and loads of, physical techniques that people hadn't perhaps seen before. So John and Todd had seen this, took that back to the States. They then created Burn Manhattan. Tim, who was a member of Rejects Revenge, had stayed in touch as pals, and we invited them over in 2003-04, I think, to come and work with us. And we created a show which was based on their show called The Beast, which was the American show, and we created a show called Hoof. And we spent a considerable amount of time working on that. And because all of us had worked in a device capacity, but not now, and we'd done some improv, we started working on that, and we did a couple of test events, and they went very well. At the same time, there was an amazing director called oh my gosh, Ken Campbell, who was based in Liverpool. And Ken was the former director of a local theatre there. And he did a show called Illuminati. Oh my gosh, what's it called? Can't remember. Anyway, it lasted 24 hours, and they would do 24 hours. And what I really admired about Ken was he would work with just interesting people. If he saw you on the street, he'd kind of go, "Oh, there's a punk. I want that energy in my show." So it didn't matter if you were an actor, he would just literally pull people in who he just went. And so he built this huge ensemble, and it was an experience. The audience it was all performed around you. It's sort of what we would now describe as immersive. Kind of event. It was a happening. It was all sorts of things, and he was really like kind of going, "I want to push the envelope of what performance can be." And how Ken was the instigator of School of Nights that you saw in Liverpool. So Ken was mischievous. Ken also trained at Second City, so he was in the same house team as, oh my gosh, what's the Joan Rivers in 1967. So Ken had gone over to the States and trained and been part of the Second City house team with an alumni, which is like you just go, wow. Ken came back, and then he started to re-explore later in his life kind of spontaneous work or being spontaneous. And so Ken at the same time in 2004 was also doing this work. So we had these two things. We had these American guys who'd come over. We had Ken, who was working with a large ensemble of people and farting around in disguises with the show that he created, The Everyman. And he had a huge ensemble of local performers and people who'd never performed before. And so he was a guy that you kind of went, oh, okay, that's so there was a scene starting to happen in Liverpool. And so that's my early experience of improv. Barring that, I kind of like to try stuff out, work out what's happening in the world, and try and make stuff that hasn't been made before. So yeah, sorry, long answer, Julian. See, I told you I'd go off on tangents and little roundabouts and around the houses, as they say.
Yeah, no, that provides a very full picture. I think it is interesting to hear this source of improv beginning because, out here, I feel like, I don't know how much Hal has talked about it, but there definitely is that big comedy presence in improv. And it took some working on our own to do some more theatrical stuff. One thing that, since we're already sort of getting into it, I'm interested to ask is, what do you see as maybe unique to improv or specific to improv as opposed to devised work? What do you really get out of doing it on the stage in that moment versus what sounds like a relatively similar and like relatively similar in terms of like creative capacity, like devising process by which you just do some refining and whatnot?
I think when people are truly relaxed and really are listening very carefully and watching very carefully, I think magic happens that you wouldn't necessarily be able to recreate. Because once we've written something down, you've got to make sure that that works every single time. So when we used to improvise scenes, something would happen and it would be hilarious, but we'd never be able to recapture it.
Yeah.
So in lots of ways, you kind of are trying to find the best moments of improvisation, writing those down to construct a play which has all the forms of a play, all the characteristics of a play. So it's got a linear chronological order. It may be messed around with a little bit in terms of it structurally, but the script is then fixed. What I think is similar, and I think people value devised work, is because they know very often that the people who are performing it are the people who created it. And I think that has a different connection with an audience as opposed to, take, for example, Shakespeare. There's been so many versions of each play. There's interpretation, which is what the difference is. The edit, where people have edited, has it been relocated? Has it been reinterpreted? Has it been reframed time-wise? So I think in lots of ways, the magic of improv, and I've never really found a term that I'm ever happy with, but I think there is something that happens and this is about the relationship with the audience, is when you devise something, you pretty much know where the beats of something are and you're going to recreate. With improv, there's you are as surprised as the audience are as the words or the physicality happen. So you're making the discovery almost point something of a second before the audience are.
Right.
What I think is special.
Yeah. One thing that I found special about working with you as a director was the ways in which sometimes scripted and improvised things would be mixed. I feel like in the improv world, a lot of times it's entirely improvised, but you were able to weave in bits of choreography or very specific sort of structural bits that we knew were going to happen in every show, because I don't think you have that mental block against like these two can't unite. I was wondering when that uniting process started and kind of what your favorite things that you've created that involved scripted parts of an improvised show.
Well, how I describe it is like giving scaffolding.
Mm-hmm.
So very often the things that make people nervous are around editing or where I need to be on the space or what's my role. So I think because we made Taxi Tales specifically for an ensemble and in a specific environment where we know we've got 6 hours to be able to work together as a big team of 16 people to learn a process, to be able to achieve something with a particular effect. So I think very often that is the thinking and the construction of it is thinking about, well, how do people work best? They often work best in having a conversation in a fixed location, and the premise being is they might never meet each other ever again, and everybody has that experience of being in a taxi cab. So there's something that unifies. It's a universal experience. People really are interested in each other, or they should be. And so in lots of ways, the other conceits around it about how to do a movement section or this, that, and the other is these are just the sort of finessing of a piece of work to make it look theatrical. So from the entrance into a particular piece of music, you can make your decision. You can come in really quickly. You can, so there's agency is given to the performer, but at the same time, there are some restrictions just to ensure it has a theatrical form that is really clear and that you don't have to think, you just have to do. And that's very often the best way of being able to get the best out of people. Now, obviously, if you go first, then you're the first person into the taxi, be it driver or be it passenger. You get, one of the things I've watched back and reflected upon is if you're passenger number 5, you've probably sat for 20 minutes listening to the dialogue, listening to things, and your job is to come in. So I now appreciate kind of going, that's maybe not quite right. So there's a little bit of refining maybe going on. And so in lots of ways, it was made for a specific purpose and with a specific set of, it's got boundaries. Other pieces of work that I've made, there's a lot more freedom and fluidity in it. Doesn't mean that there aren't some sort of scaffolding in there to support people, but it's very much dependent upon either the cohort I'm working with, which means experience levels. So you can have people who are really experienced and people who are completely new to improv, who have some performance experience but have never performed live in a spontaneous way. So I think it's about taking the care and attention to work out how can you enhance what people already have, which is them and the stories that they have within themselves, and then creating a form which allows them to be, I hate the word authentic, but allows them to be able to draw upon personal experience as opposed to kind of going, I've got to be funny, I've got to be clever, I've got to be witty. All of those things I find hugely unattractive on stage because I kind of go, it's a one-trick pony, a silly voice. It's a, and for some people, they make careers out of that and they're amazing. But majority of people aren't given comedy bones like that. Some people are just naturally funny. I always wanted to be that. I was very, I've got a friend who's just hilariously funny, both physically and verbally. Is just so sharp, but also so clumsy in their body. But most people are not blessed with that skill set. Actually, comedy emerges from the situation. So I always think that the best written sitcoms where it's a fixed location, perhaps two or three, with a set of character types that we all recognize, and we butt heads, or something happens, or there's a repeating gag that's on running through series after series after series, and where they actually like each other, is a type of comedy. So Brooklyn Nine-Nine, I think, is one of the greatest comedies. I know lots of people kind of go, well, it's this and it's that, but actually no one punches down. It's fun, it's frothy, but actually they deal with some real stuff. And you kind of go, these are sort of slight exaggerations of real people, but I kind of imagine that that would sit in that world. I believe them. Whereas I think there's some comedy which is very funny, but it tends to be quite mean comedy, where it's sort of it's not the most. I just got tired of that. I think it's too easy to be mean to someone, and so I think it's much more clever and more crafted to be able to create something where there's actual real, where I really care about them. So there's a great TV show in the UK called The Royal Family, which was written by a stand-up comedian called Caroline Aherne, who's from Manchester. And if you get a chance, check out there's like seven seasons. Sadly, Caroline passed away, but it's a family. It's literally sat. You see three camera shots, either at the table, which is very rare, or mainly it's in front of the sofa. And the writing is so natural and so crisp, and they are so in tune with each other that one of the actors, Ricky Tomlinson, who's from Liverpool but plays the dad in it, is not very. He's much older, but he couldn't remember his lines. But he's such a funny guy. I mean, he was a stand-up comedian. He's been a bricklayer. He was imprisoned he was blacklisted as part of with his union, and was subsequently imprisoned. So he's got a real rich life, and he's just a natural orator, storyteller. And so they just let him do his thing. As long as he roughly got where they were needed to get to, they were happy. And as a result, the language sounded like real people speaking, as opposed to a writer who's demonstrating how clever they are through their writing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the sort of stuff I really like, is where it feels like real people having real conversations in scenarios that we recognize.
Yeah.
Did you ever do that in any of your purely scripted work? Have you put on a show that has both scripted scenes and improvised dialogue in the same show? Just a pure question, maybe.
Yeah. We had a show called BLT, which was set in two brothers sat in a sandwich shop, and they fall in love with the same girl, who turns out to be the baddie. And there was a dentist scene. So we knew how to set up the dentist chair. We used like suitcases to create this thing. And then whatever happened in the scene, we knew where the beginning was and we knew where the end point was, but we would always keep that, like, they say find the game of the scene. But we were doing that within the middle of a scripted piece, deliberately to try and for us to find something new every night, because we toured that show so many, hundreds of times here, there, and everywhere. But to kind of keep the playfulness of its construction, because we created it through play,
Mhm.
and how do you then replicate and keep that thing alive? Which I think is the big thing with, that's why after 6 months, most people are done on doing, if you're doing 8 shows a week, mentally it's quite draining to be able to still have, so which is why companies will often refresh their casts on a regular basis, because I know I've been in shows where we did like 200 shows, and I'm walking around the stage saying words, emoting, and doing the thing that I'm supposed to do. But in my head, I'm writing a shopping list of what I've got to do afterwards, because you're literally walking around like a robot,
Uh-huh.
which is an awful thing to say. But at a certain point, you just kind of go, I'm so done with this. But I'm in a contract. I'm going to do a professional job, but at the same time, I'm sort of kind of I'm not discovering anything new in it. And I would try and find the most, slightly late on this beat, or just try and just do something, because inherently we are all creative creatures, and we want to find a way of finding something new, and something, we chase that kind of, and then you end up, the beats that you rehearsed become off, and then you get the show notes going, oh, tonight wasn't so good, this was slightly off, this was slightly off, and I'm kind of going, I kind of want to I don't want to be restricted in that way.
Mhm.
Obviously that kind of stuff pays the bills, but yeah. So yeah, I kind of moved away from, when was it, 2014? Kind of closed the company that I was running at the time, and kind of went, oh, okay, I'm moving into a different phase of my life. I moved into academia and worked at a university, sort of passing on and training new young actors and theatre makers. So I had a bit of time to sort of pause. I was due to I finished my PhD, and then I was due to kind of want to keep my currency, because I think if you don't stay current with practice and things like that, you kind of, what might have been current 5 years ago is now no longer relevant, and I wanted to stay up to date for my students. So I was kind of going, oh, okay. And then obviously pandemic hit, which was kind of a bit of like, whoa. And the lovely thing about, not the pandemic, but the challenge that was thrown my way was, oh, now I've got to make a theatre show with 16 students who are in different parts of the country, and we've got to do it online. And I was like, quite a lot of my colleagues were panicking, and I was kind of going, this is going to be so good, because it's a big experiment, and let's push the technology.
Mhm.
So I don't know how we managed, we discovered that with Zoom, you could get it to, if you've got the lighting right, a bit like we saw earlier, you could, the listeners at home won't know, but the lighting on my camera is starting to flash and make it fractal. So it's almost like this strobe effect. So we're kind of going, right, how do we achieve that? How can we use that? How can we, how can we employ loads of different things? I found it a very, obviously it was a horrible thing, and it was really stressful for lots of people. But at this time, I was kind of going, this is the best thing, because it's completely pushed the envelope of my theatre making. And as a result, me pushing my students to kind of going, doesn't matter what we create, actually, let's just experiment and play around with some stuff. So we made a show about all the famous marks that we knew, because 1974, I mean, it was a show idea I had, but in 1974, Mark was the most popular British boy's name, um, and in 2019, 2020, it wasn't even in the top 100. So I was like, why is that now happening? You know, so we looked at, we had like skid marks, so the terrible
Mm.
marks of history. Bookmarks, we had the authors.
Uh-huh.
We played around with that. It allowed us to look at a load of different kind of cultural figures that we could then put in. And so we invented, we made it like this really odd cult. We make the audience have to show us things before they were allowed into the main. You had to come with a black marker pen and a kitchen toilet roll or stuff you could house, and we made everybody do certain things. So we made them draw a black marker pen on the end of their toilet roll, and then they had to rub it onto their eye, which left a circle on their eye. We made it, and if you didn't, we would, and we had some fake people come in who we asked to come in, and then we boot them out of the Zoom. So people were like, "Oh no, they're taking this really seriously." It's all set up, but we invented stuff and kind of had that spirit of invention and got excited by that because I figured, well, everyone's going to be in the same situation. Let's kind of go, what have we got around us within our, so we put almost like a little manifesto of kind of going, okay, your costume can only come from the bathroom. So we had people cut up towels to make like hair wigs, and we've got your makeup can only come from the kitchen. So we had people kind of going, okay, here's flour, when you play around. So we just kind of invented and created a load of sort of our own boundary play within, and then create something from that. So that was loads. That was loads of fun. Although the rest of it was fairly scary and horrendous.
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic had a huge positive effect on our improvisation as well. I feel like for both of us, it allowed us to take things in a totally new direction and kind of provided a reset.
I think.
Yeah, go.
Oh well, I think one of the things that was helpful about it is sort of similar to something you said before about certain people want to get into performance because they want to be on a stage and they want to be witty or they want to be funny and show off how great they are. And there's this really humbling thing, I feel like, of doing improv over Zoom for over a year where it wasn't the spectacle and the big roaring crowds of the before times. And so there was this like core group who stuck around and chose to do it over Zoom. And it was the like forging of those relationships. I think that was powerful.
I also think it made potentially improvisers think not only about their voice, but the micro gesture of the face and what you do with your hands. And I actually think that improv potentially wasn't sort, because very often it's very external and not internal. And I think actually it made me consider, I found this like what you're doing almost like screen acting, but actually how can we utilize that and put that on the stage? So you really kind of think about everything that you're doing and really conscious about it, because very often you're watching yourself back. And I think that particular things have particular effects. And I think that for me was the thing that I learned most. I mean, I can talk and create witty dialogue and I can link story and all of those, but actually the presentation of not using language and the placing of subtext and the placing of where you might pause, then made me go back and look at the works of Beckett and Pinter and those sort of things and kind of go, okay, could improv do that? Can we do that? Yeah, of course we can. And then I sort of, you follow one breadcrumb, you ask a question like a breadcrumb and you follow that little path and you kind of go on this path of discovery. And sometimes you go down complete kind of side roads which lead nowhere. But the learning that you've undertaken in that by taking those steps back and kind of go, oh, we're going to go that way. Actually, that's how you learn and test and push and grow. And I don't think anything that I'm particularly doing is probably been discovered by other people. I always kind of go, well, how might I do that? I think there's a big thing around originality and people's hang up at, oh, it's got to be original. Well, you take somebody as, in the postmodernists would kind of go, well, I take your idea and I do it in my way. It's a new idea.
Yeah.
So, it may be inspired by and mirror and reflect certain elements or traits, but it's not been done like that before. And again, it goes back to the first question you asked, which is why do I love improv? Is because it's temporal.
Mm-hmm.
It's there and it's done, and you move on, and it's there. That's the magic that happens because the audience kind of goes, well, it's the same shape or structure, but what happened in that is always going to be different. And I think that's what's exciting. And I think UK audiences, once they know something is, if it's not chaotic, so there's a thing around chaos. You can create chaos, but it has to be controlled chaos.
Mm-hmm.
If it's just chaotic, the audience know.
Mm-hmm.
So by structuring and scaffolding things, you can have all this chaos, but it's controlled. But that takes a long time to be able to master, I think. And so when you have something that's people trust, and I think that's the contract that you have to establish with an audience, which comes back to the scripted thing, is if you walk on stage and you do your introduction and it's not scripted, I don't know why. It's the one moment that you get to talk to the audience that you can rehearse because it doesn't have to be improvised.
Mm-hmm.
However, the amount of people I see that go to festivals and stuff and haven't really thought about the audience and kind of go, hey, who's never been to an improv show before? Well,
Mm-hmm.
you're at an improv festival. There's a good chance that pretty much no one's going to put their hand up. So think about those things.
Yeah.
So I think there are elements, the bookends, as I call it, is kind of going, okay, if you do the beginning and the end, and that's the point where you have some control. So write it, control what you want to say, because that's where the tone and the contract is set up with the audience going, okay, we know that they know what they know, they look and know what they're doing. So I feel comfortable in there. And that's part of the thing is about trust. And as soon as you break, and it's the easiest thing to lose. So you've got to value it. So trust with an audience is very much a key factor in my thinking. So I kind of go, okay, I've tried some stuff out and it's just bombed, and I kind of go, I'm okay with that,
Mm-hmm.
because the learning, the testing of the material and the learning of that is you kind of go, well, I won't maybe do that again, or we pushed too hard, or we weren't quite in tune together. You go back and reflect again, and you test it again, and it bombs, and you kind of go, yeah, there's something structurally not right. So it's a series. It's about being brave, taking risks, and not really concerning that of failure, because failure is how we develop and improve. I mean, how many scientific experiments of we were searching for one thing, we
Mm-hmm.
thought it failed, and then we discovered something else which was equally brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't ever experiment and then try stuff, you never discover something else. So, you've got to try and push the envelope a little bit. But obviously, for different people at different points, that everyone's on a different journey. I feel confident, to kind of I'm not it doesn't bother me. I've got nothing to prove to anyone anymore. I feel much more free to be able to take risks, and push the boundaries of where I am. Whereas some people who maybe haven't quite got through all of those things, I want to be the funny one. Very all performers and makers have different reasons for creating stuff. Part of my reason for creating stuff is I'm trying to work out who I am, where do I relate to the world, or how do I relate to the world? What does it mean potentially to be, 50 in the early 2000s? There's all sorts of things going on in the world that bother me. How can because I don't want to create necessarily political work, but I certainly believe in personal politics. And how can that inform and perhaps maybe challenge somebody's idea of the view or ideas of the world? How might I be able to? And I think the fundamentally thing is the thing around just love. in a scene, I think if you don't love your partner in that moment, then something's not quite right. And drama is all about love and hate. Every play, every film you ever watch, I love you, I hate you. It's about acceptance or rejection in some way, shape, or form. So, and I prefer much more now to play that idea of love. And I think if you play in that, but also the word is play, and it's not being, or so you can be the baddie, you can play the baddie, but you're not being the baddie. And I think that's a really important mental step as well to take. Is kind of there's a reason they're called plays. They're not called beings, and nobody wrote, unless you're very fortunate, you haven't got an author writing specifically for your voice. So you have to kind of play with that and kind of work out what's the blueprint. So all of those skills, I think, as an actor, you kind of apply. And I think the more you connect and the more fun you have and the more love you have for somebody on stage, you can have a blazing argument, but it doesn't mean that I don't love this person I'm performing with. It's all pretend. It's not real. So, I think playing with that idea of how do we connect? How do I connect with you? How do we connect to the world? How do we connect to the audience? Because it actually, very often in theatre, it's a binary process. It's like I'm the viewer, you're the performer, and there's only going one way like that. Whereas in improv, it's going back and forth in multiple ways, because I make something in the moment, you laugh at it. Oh, okay, kind of go, oh, maybe we do that again. So there's a constant set of communication going on. In addition to, if you choose to interact at the beginning and for ask fors or suggestions, or you pull someone in and out of it, I liken kind of improv, that sort of relationship that you have with an improv audience, the sort of the equivalent of pantomime, where there is talking to the audience. There are the pulling up of children to come and do X, Y, Z. The audience are encouraged to interact with you by booing the baddie, or hurrah, or we join in singing together, or the communal song, or this and that. So, and there's something, pantomime comes from commedia, and there's something about that playfulness of character type and playing those universal, because commedia is based on universal stories. You go and look at what's his name? Oh, his book's not here. Somebody Graham, I can't remember. And he docs, because in Italy, loads of the Lazzi are all documented, and so he's got this book. The name's going to really annoy me. I can't think of it now. But anyway, there's all the Lazzi are documented, and essentially they're around, lots of them around poverty and starvation and desire and lust and revenge, all the things that are universal themes that we see regularly on screen or on stage.
I wanted to dig in a little bit to, I guess, your role as an improv director and sort of pull on some things that you mentioned earlier. So Hal and I are in huge agreement with respect to really like grinding our teeth when we feel like we're improvising with people or directing people who have this prime directive to be funny on stage or be interesting on stage. And I think that in any of my directing experience, that has always been one of the hardest things, is to get people to trust the process and trust that comedy or intrigue or whatever will come out on stage. So as someone who has surely worked with, many young improvisers and new improvisers and whatnot, how do you find yourself getting people out of their shells?
I think, again, you have to love and trust someone, even if I don't know them particularly. It's kind of going, this is a party that we're all invited to, and I trust you and I love you, and I'm not expecting you to trust and love me in the same way. But what we're going to do is find common ground, and where that common ground is me being organized, so you feel that you're cared for and that I've considered everything to ensure that you don't feel nervous or anxious. And trust, again, is one of those things that I take very, very seriously, because it's easily lost. In regards to working with people who I've worked with different troupes over the years, over a longer period or short period. I'm not really an improv coach. My primarily, I think the director's job is to be the eyes and ears and experience of the audience, and it's to ensure that what people are doing on stage will translate for an audience where they also feel cared for and trusted and respected. That doesn't mean you can't challenge an audience with terms of themes or things like that, but you need to know that you are in control of that material, and you are very careful about what you say and why you say it, and what's the particular effect that you're wanting to achieve with an audience. So for me as a director, I kind of go, my time is spent thinking around how to scaffold and structure. So I always create some sort of performance notation, which is both helpful for the person who's involved, but it's a series of kind of guidelines, kind of going, look, I've really thought about this. I've tested it. This at this point is the best way I have found to do this in this time that we have together.
Mm-hmm.
So in lots of ways, it's about kind of communicating and being patient with folk, because patience, sometimes you have to get the crap out. So you have to allow people to work through all of their little tricks, all of, they've exploited their toolbox. If you've seen that character before, we've seen the new character, different character, try something else, different choice. That's one of my favorite phrases that a teacher once used to use at me, was go, different choice. And it forces you to kind of almost empty the tank and refill anew. Because improvisation, it should be in the moment and playing in the present. And too often we rely upon things that audiences have trained us. Oh, they like that when I do that voice, or they like that and you kind of go, audiences are really quick on kind of going, yeah, don't believe it. You're not connected. Because when you found that the first time, it came out of something that was in the moment, and it just was, it just was there. You can't then go back and remind it. It's almost like you're trying to replicate a situation and a context that now no longer exists. So you've almost got to get people to the point where they're so exhausted, they've got all of their crap out, that then you can start to play. And and so with some troops, it's like, that could take, rehearsing once a week, maybe for 6-7 weeks, to kind of get to the point where they've just kind of gone, I've exhausted all my tricks, and now I'm kind of coming in kind of going, okay, I'll just see what happens, and then support them in that journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I remember you at one point at the very end of the festival. I was mentioning that I was considering studying directing, and you were like, "Oh, don't do that. I could explain to you how to direct well in a very short period of time." In a very short period of time on this podcast, like when you're directing scripted work, or if someone wanted to learn, some basic tools of how to direct people, what would you suggest are the things that would immediately increase someone's directing abilities?
Well, my big thing is we work in a 3D medium, not in a 2D medium.
Mm-hmm.
So it drives me. I don't understand why teams have a backline. Yeah. It's the worst position on stage for both the performer and the audience, because you're upstaging perhaps the two-person scene that's happening in front of you. It's the worst position to actually watch, and there's no function to a backline. They just stand, and they're often laughing at what's happening. So as an audience, I'm watching the person who's laughing, because they're the biggest thing in the room, not what's happening. So none of it makes any sense to me. So the first thing would be to kind of go, okay, understand where the strengths are on stage, Why do people because most drama is out of balance. So why stand center stage? It's the weakest position on stage. Out of balance, out of kilter, and create something that's visually interesting. So you've got one person upstage right and you've got one person downstage left. Immediately you've got some sort of dynamic going on. They don't need to speak, they just need to turn and look at each other and hold their breath. Immediately it creates question marks in the audience's mind, which is to say, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen? Immediately that's interesting. I think the impact of screen and how people stand, no one ever stands like that in real life. So there is a theatricality, which sort of, the phrase, I fell in love with some from across the room. Well, replicate that. Yeah, play around with things that we know. Play around with movement and how things move, in the space. Working on stage should be a dance, and it should be choreographic. Now, you can let the audience in on that, or you can hide it from them. And immediately, how do I get 10 people on stage to be able to move in a fashion which is the same? Okay, you give them agency and you kind of go, here's a chess move. Okay, and what does a knight do? It hops forward 2 spaces and goes either to the left or the right, or it goes backward 2 spaces and goes to the left or the right. So you give agency to people to kind of go, here's a really simple thing. What we're going to do at the end of this is you just do one series of movement. There you go. Create little simple. So the audience, if they're watching really carefully, might pick up on it, but there's 4 potential moves there. So you kind of go, oh, they're all moving at the same time. They're all stopping and starting at the same time. So syncopation or amplification of things happening at the same time. If one person does it, it looks just weird. If 2 people do it, it looks like it's being done for a reason. If 3 people are doing it and they're all doing it, it's like, oh, this has power. So you kind of amplify that image. So in lots of ways, the kind of thing of ensemble and the thing of performance is about everybody being on the same page at the same time. The biggest bugbear that I have is transitions, because transitions are the main point of a play. You can kill a play by either not carrying the momentum from one scene and into the next, or alternatively, the exit of the person. So I've done the scene and now I don't believe in that character anymore in terms of how you exit, because transitions are the most important thing in theatre, and they are very often one of the things that are least considered. So borrowing from screen, there's so many different filmic or screen edits that are amazing. Well, just go and watch some screen stuff and go, do you know what we're going to do? We're going to do a snap from this to that. We're going to employ this, the slow fade with a piece of music that comes in. We're going to use a psychological piece of music that then is completely opposite to what the next, we've got so many resources available to us, but space is the big thing that really kind of makes me kind of go, oh, okay, you haven't really thought this through. You've got a great concept. All your improvisers create great dialogue. They've got some physicality to them, but very often we talk too much, as I'm ably demonstrating on your podcast. We talk too much, but we don't really consider that silence and movement and how I might just turn my body one way and keep my head the opposite, and allow that to inform a character or an attitude or a feeling. Whereas what we do is we tend to go to our brains first. And that's the great thing that Todd and John from when I first was training with them was kind of going, actually, we start with the body. There's a great director, British director called Joan Littlewood, who created a piece called Oh, What a Lovely War, which is a sort of political satire on the First World War. And her book talks about whenever she was an actor and a director, and she would always try to find the shoes first.
Mm.
Because if you find the shoes, you find the walk. If you find the walk, you find the attitude. If you find the attitude, it inhabits the words. So rather than thinking, and lots of European practice tends to go down the route of start with the physicality, the external, and then it internalizes, and very often in sort of psychological training, it's kind of the internal then becomes the external.
Mhm.
And, borrow with, find what works for you. I'm not saying that one's better than the other. I'm just saying is that apply the tools, be a bit like a magpie going, I really like that Meisner exercise because it connects me with that, and that it helps me observe, but actually really like that Lecoq exercise, which is about kind of how I'm in a neutral state, or things like that. And so mash up all those ideas and kind of find what works for you, because there's no, if there was a robotic way of learning to act or perform, we'd all be doing the same thing, but we don't. And also look at what great performers do. What do? They do very little. They're just very relaxed, and they inhabit something that has almost like an external glow that you watch them, because they're not trying. They're really not. They hold back on their lines, or they're effortless. There's the great actor Tim Roth. I was very fortunate to see. He was in a show called Metamorphosis that was directed by Stephen Burkoff, and Stephen Burkoff took the writing of the UK, the literary aspects, because we're very much a writer nation, but mashed it up with a very European mime physicality, and merged those two things in the late 70s, and it completely changed British theatre making. So you just smashed these two things together, and using language, very sort of East End, which is part of London, which has a lots of like rhyming slang, and incorporating phonetic colloquial language, and but writing it in the style of Shakespeare, and mashing all of those things, because we up until that point we were kind of going, it's the well-made play, it's the British farce, it's the Noel Coward, oh, fancy a game of badminton, and very middle class. Actually, what Burkoff did was kind of going, I'm going to go and study in Paris. I've got what I need from that. I'm going to bring that sort of physicality and that thing. I'm going to bring it back, and I'm going to mash it up with my own writing that I'm adapting from stories that I've read. And so it's experimenting and finding, and then eventually that became. We saw Burkoff was just repeating the same trick, and then it's not the same anymore. Theatre had borrowed from that, and then moved on. It sort of had its fashion, and it's some of those plays are still brilliantly written. Really, if you ever get a chance to read Stephen Burkoff's work. But Stephen Burkoff went off to Hollywood and did loads of. He was in Beverly Hills Cop as the baddie. He was in Octopussy as the evil Russian general, and he went there to make money so he could come back and make theatre. So you go and do those commercial jobs to then come back and do the art. But he was amazing to see in his pomp and prime. Was just
Oh, that's awesome. Mark, I want to pivot slightly to the Liverpool Improvisation Festival. It's been running for 3 years now. It was so much fun when I just visited. What prompted you to start it? What are your big goals with it, and like how is it different from other festivals?
Well, as I said, post pre-pandemic, I was going to come back and do some improv stuff, and then that sort of stopped because there was a fairly healthy improv scene in Liverpool still. There's been companies that have come and gone, but there's been a fairly consistent desire to either learn how to or perform. And there were little pop-up groups here and there, and we're in this bar and we're here and doing this. And then the pandemic hit, and loads of people, either for whatever reason, had to return home. So teams broke up. There were teams that were still working online. It wasn't something that I particularly got into because I was working a lot online. So to spend some of my leisure time kind of doing improv felt a bit like, oh God, my eye. This is what, and I generally think this is why I now wear glasses, because I spent so long on Zoom, upwards of sometimes 10 hours a day while we were in rehearsals, and it was just exhausting. So I didn't really want to do the whole Zoom pub quiz or online stuff. And I know there was some amazing stuff, and I did do some, but I was just like, I'm so mentally exhausted. Um, uh, so Liverpool's scene was sort of quite, I wouldn't say down, but I went and met with Emma, who runs LCI, who'd managed to get through the pandemic and had a load of people who'd been training through her. And so I was kind of going, look, how might be the best? What's the best approach? Liverpool has a lot of festivals. It's very busy, but there's a reason they have lots of festivals, because it gives a really sharp focus to a particular art form for a couple of days. And as long as you find your slot within the year that you're not overlapping or clashing with other things, it gives a spotlight. And I felt that a spotlight was what was needed for Liverpool at the time. It may be that in a year, 2 years time, it we need to rethink it, and it might not be required anymore. But I've always thought that improv belongs in theatres where you have a production value to it. And so I approached the venue at the time with somebody who was running it that I knew, because he'd previously sat on our board when I had a theatre company. So I kind of went, well, okay, we'd like to do this. Their venue is relatively small in comparison to most of the venues in the city. So I feel confident that if we do it, a bit like that Field of Dreams, build it and they will come. I think if you make the offer and you make the right kind of offer to people, in the way that we don't charge people to apply. Someone from a working class background, I know that the barriers that potentially are put in place, which could put people off from applying. So I was like, well, let's not put any barriers in place. Let's ensure that the venues that we work in are accessible to everyone. So in terms of mobility, and I appreciate that other cities and other venues and stuff there might be a compromise on that, because not everywhere's. I mean, lots of city centre venues in Liverpool, because of their historic and conservation, you can't have level entrances into buildings. There's always a step or this. So I was kind of like, well, let's start with what are the basic principles that I would like to operate from and work from that. And so the first year I curated through people that I knew, sort of both locally, regionally, and nationally, and was like, okay, let's pull this group of people together and we'll put on something. It was really well received. It was really good. Running a festival by yourself is incredibly stressful. Because I didn't have any money other than a couple of £100 savings. So I was kind of going, so I spoke to a former student of mine who's a graphic designer. I said, look, could you design me a logo and for 50 quid? And they did. And then I hired him because I managed to raise some money for him to come and visually document the festival.
Mm-hmm.
So he created loads of artwork. We had somebody who did, Andrew, who came and did some photography. We had a film student who I managed to find some money for. Obviously, it wasn't a huge amount, but we tried to make sure that everybody got some money from it. And so we started, and then in year two, I then moved because I have things that I like. And I have a bias, and so to try and avoid that, I pulled together a group of panelists. So the idea being is that we were kind of going, well, first year was a test event to see if there's a general need or a desire for it, which there was. Second year was like, right, okay, well, we need to try and think about how best for me not to be picking material and stuff because that can be problematic. So we created an independent panel of people who came, and any application, all of the identifying information was removed. So we look at work based on the idea. Does it get us excited? Do I want to see this piece of work? And so that's how we made the selection. And obviously last year we did the same thing. Jen came on board last year and had the idea of, well, we could do an ensemble. I'd had this idea rumbling around. So we've always done project work, which means we have applications, and then we're going to kind of go, we're going to do something for children and young people, and we're going to deliberately make a piece of improv for that age range. So we will deliberately try to look what's not being made, and try and push that envelope to serve a part of the community that might be not served. Which is why I think something that's unique about us is we always have a children's offer. Secondly, we encourage people to put on new work, and we will program people who might not be traditionally viewed as improv. However, they do work spontaneously. So in our first year, we had a professional fool, who's Joe Tremarco, who trained with Jonathan and through Full Time. So fooling is a British art form it's an art form that's very, very old. So you have the potential of being killed by the king, but you can be hugely rude. It's a very subtle balancing act to be able to get right. And Joe's amazing at it. I mean, she toured her show all around the world, multiple times. I approached her and said, look, do you fancy doing it? In year 2, Rowena is a dancer and primarily works on pole. I sort of said to her, look, would you be up for doing, because she'd done Marina Abramovich's retrospective.
Wow.
And was one of the performers as part of that. And so she's blends between art, dance and performance art. And I said, look, and she said, well, I'd like to do something for 4 hours. I'd like to dance on the pole for 4 hours and see what happens. And I went, yeah, okay, cool. How do we make that work? We sold in chapters. So loads of people, once they went in for the first hour, stayed for the whole thing and just went, so we like to sort of push and provoke, not in a bad way, but just to kind of go, improv's not just give us an idea, we'll make you laugh, move on to the next one, or we're going to improvise a play. There's lots of different, so what we try to do is ensure that the whole community is represented. So we, people who are not as experienced as others, and we've got shows that have been running for 10 years. So we try to blend all of those things together. I think with the help of Jen, it's getting much better. And so we're, any project's a 5-year in event management terms, anything's a 5-year project. So we're sort of in that middle section now where we're kind of going, okay, we've tried that. We roughly know what our audience is and who they might be and where they might come from. How might we improve that experience? So year 1 was a huge learning curve. Year 2 was a huge learning curve. Year 3, we're kind of going, okay, people are consistently saying we're doing this well, but it's more the minor details now. It's the refining. So we've chopped the tree down. We've now modeled it into rough shape of a horse's head. Now we're using the fine tools to kind of carve out this thing. The next thing will be the sanding down and the final varnishing is the next 2 years. So I'm hoping that, we've kind of, and then of course, year 5, we might kind of go, let's explode it all. Let's burn the horse and do something. And I think that's kind of healthy perspective to have, is kind of go refine it, experiment, test, reflect, evaluate again and again and again and again. And then by that point, I'll probably be bored. And that's probably what
the 7-year cycle.
There we go.
Our 7-year cycle of this episode is also slowly coming to its cycle. We're an hour in now. So is Julian, do you have anything you're trying to sneak in the last the last portion?
Um, I well, I'll sneak in my main sentiment, which is this has been very interesting to sit back and listen to this. I feel like Hal and I are two young people who have this sort of inclination towards a lot of similar improv stuff towards you, but we are not as battle tested in really trying to do it. So it's been a pleasure to hear your journey.
Yeah, it's like super fascinating. And maybe this is one like last little mini question of, yeah, just like what when you were 25, what project were you working on? What were you up to? Just because it's funny to. I feel like in the U.S. improv and theater, like there's just a lot less governmental support, but also just like institutional support. Like it's just like a lot of the things you're saying of like, oh, I started a touring company, or kind of like seem like how would that be possible? So I don't know. Do you have any sentiment? A lot of the people listening, I think, are similar ages to us. So of that kind of thing.
So we started a theatre company with no money.
Mm-hmm.
We put some we made a piece of work, which is the first thing I'd say is don't think about setting up a company or anything like that. Is make the work first and then work out, do you want to
Mm-hmm.
do something else with it? So I think people rush work to the stage too quickly. So there's a process of I've got an initial idea, let's work on that idea and test it. And I always believe in testing with an audience. So there are loads of scratch nights, loads of see how it's received, listen to what people have to say. You don't have to agree with what people say, but listen, because they're probably giving you, and then interpret what they're saying and really, really listen. Then the next stage is to kind of go, oh, okay, how do we maybe think about what this might look like to from a marketeer's perspective? How do I just talk about my work to somebody else who has never heard of us?
Mm-hmm.
How do I convince somebody to give me a crack at? So be very clear about what that work is. So really understand. I mean, I very often don't talk about when I make work in the program copy. It doesn't mention that it's improvised.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing about the taxi tales is everybody's been on a taxi journey.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's been in with the weird taxi driver or had a weird journey. Everybody's interested. Bizarrely, we're all quite voyeuristic. Look at the deluge of reality TV. It's clear that we're very nosy. Papers are driven on people's controversy or things like that. So we're quite nosy as a human race. We're quite, we love the gossip. Oh, have you heard this has happened? Oh, what about that? So immediately you kind of go, well, as long as you communicate what you're attempting to do, people will resonate with that.
Mm-hmm.
I think the more difficult stuff to try and sell is it's like whose line is it anyway? Because that's what most people's reference point is. Okay, well, I really liked Whose Line Is It Anyway? I can watch that on TV. Why would I need to come and see your show?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
so work out what are you selling, and that's sometimes that's difficult to work out, but the more you do it, the better you get at being able to communicate. And actually, that solidifies your idea. That 150 words of copy is your sort of blueprint and battle plan all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So if you really work on that and have many eyes and many ideas flowing into it, what are the key markers that the audience want? Okay, if you tell me your show is hilarious and I buy a ticket, you are putting a big thing up going, well, this is hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if it's not hilarious, you're mis-selling something. So is it comedy or is it humorous or is it will make you smile? Be very clear about what that is, because the contract that you're telling people is really important. And not every comedy show is hilarious. It's not. It's the quality of laughter. So if your show will have proper howling belly laughs and there are only 3 in the show, I would want to see that, where I lose control and I've got like snot and tears rolling down my face, as opposed to going, yeah, that was really humorous. It made me smile. I was laughing in my head.
Mhm.
So work out what that is. The second thing is the sort of, if you don't ask, you don't get.
Mhm.
So we approached loads of people and just said, "Oh, could we perform at your venue? And we've got this marketing pack, and we haven't got any reviews, but we've got some testimonials from people you may have heard of who are nailing their colours to our mast, which is to say, go and ask people who are in improv communities who you respect, who may be willing to kind of go, I'm going to write a testimonial on behalf of these people
Mhm.
because what they're doing is really interesting. Most people that you ask are more likely to kind of go, I'll come along and watch your show, because loads of people are really generous. They're generous with their time, they're generous with their spirit.
Mhm.
Doesn't hurt to ask, because if you don't ask, you don't get. If someone says no, that's not a bad thing, but they will remember that you asked and in the way that you ask. So if you kind of go, you're polite and respectful, and but you're not sycophantic. You are kind of, you treat yourself as a serious artist. Um, uh, they will respect that. They may not be able to come and assist you, but they will remember that you asked. They may well kind of go, well, I can't, but my friend, he's in town, or they're in town, or she's in town. They may come down and watch. So the thing is to ask testimonials that then support what you're wanting to do. So it's a step by step by step by step. So we made a show called The Bank Job, and it took 3 years till it went out on tour. But we did all those various stages to improve it bit by bit by bit by bit by bit, to the point where we had really good show quality, really good show photographs of a really good quality. We then uh, fundraised some money and got some funding to have a really nice, slick, glossy pack. And we spent a load of time printing up these things, putting them in to folders, folding them, licking sellotape and stamps, and mailing them out to people. And we got a mailing list from a theatre company that gave us their database.
Mhm.
Um, so ask most people. I mean, they gave us their database when we'd established ourselves. Other companies, and we went, here's the database, because you pass it on.
Mhm.
Uh, the only proviso being is that if you have somebody who comes to you at a later point, you pass it on.
Mhm.
It's not something that you've protected because you've been given it. You pass it on. So paving the way for others is important, um, and just kind of going. We'll see where it takes you. At any point, you can step off that ride, because people kind of go, well, life changes, or things get in the way, or things like that. But the big thing is kind of go. You can do it. You can. I knew Gordon, but Gordon could have said no.
Mhm.
My job was to convince Gordon that it was a good idea.
Mhm.
My way of convincing Gordon is, I know that his wet sales or beer sales is what keeps that theatre alive. So I created a festival which allows Gordon, you're going to have 24 opportunities to sell beer to an audience. How does that sound?
Mhm. And that's how you get the oh that's this is really good advice, and it's inspiring to hear right now as well. I feel like I'm just I actually, Julian, we should talk. I want to do an episode soon about how to start things and how to market things and all
Yeah.
that, because that's very exciting. All right, and then into the final, always last question: is there anything paying it forward that you want to publicize via this podcast? We do have a small listener base, but is there anything in your work that listeners should go check out?
Well, so Manchester Improv Festival opens this Friday.
Oh well.
Uh, so it's the first one. So I'm going over to watch them work and do a workshop on the Sunday. So I know this is going out 2 weeks hence, so it's not really going to be that relevant. But yeah, and I'm just really excited to see a group of people kind of investing in their scene regionally, that I'm going to go. I've seen quite a lot of the work before, but I'm going to go see stuff that I haven't. Um, I like to see stuff that I haven't seen before, and oh, that sounds like an interesting idea, or I haven't taken a workshop with that person before. I'm going to go do that. Um, I'm really excited to go up to Edinburgh. I normally go up during the festival, so I'm going to go and check out how, and go and see you up in Edinburgh. There's a ton of great stuff that is happening in the UK. Shout out to Improv Ireland. So we were very fortunate to have Neil come and perform with us. Neil's interesting because Neil applied every year to LIF, and he didn't. It was the third year that we actually were able to kind of go, oh, okay, we can find space. So the other thing is to kind of go, don't take reject. Generally most festivals would want to put on everybody. They have a whole series of calculations to make. Be it, is it a balanced program? Have we got? We might had 10 improv versions, 10 improv Shakespeare shows, but we can't put on 10 improv Shakespeare shows unless you set up your improv Shakespeare festival. So we have to find a balance. We got too much of this, so you're having to make a whole series of what might be inspiring for the local community, because it's really about what we do is about our local community and inspiring them. I think there's going to be a huge emergence fairly soon of musical improv city, which has not been the case so far. So we brought Lee Apsey last year. He did a workshop. We've had Lisa Lynn, who came up, who did a workshop on Sunday. And so I think there's going to be an emergence of musical improv in the city, which is great. I know that there's loads of people who are starting to explore theatrical forms. I know that Sue, who you met, Hal, is inquiring about doing an improvathon for Liverpool.
Wow.
The improvathon, existed in Liverpool up until sort of, I think 2018 was. I think it started in 2008 and it ran for 10 years. So they're looking to rebring that into the city. So it's kind of like the festival is really sort of a catalyst to give people confidence to, and I think most festivals should be a catalyst for the local community to show off what they do, to push the boundaries of what they do locally, because kind of go, oh, I saw that show, I was really inspired by that, and everyone raises their game, they try that bit harder, they rehearse that bit more, they work harder, and it just lifts everybody. And I think sometimes if you're the big fish in a very small pool, you've got no one really pushing you to push forward. So I think, and it's not to say it's not about competition at all, it's just about kind of going, okay, the Beach Boys push the Beatles. Yeah, Pet Sounds for me is one of the greatest albums ever made. But the Beatles are talking about, have you heard? They push themselves artistically to take more risks to better that, and it just does that. Now they're not competing in. They're going, this is amazing. We love this. This is brilliant. But we've got to step up our game, and I think that's healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that. There are loads of things there. I told you I can talk. I literally can just talk and talk and talk.
Well, that's wonderful. I learned I learned about 3 new things in that final little bit. And even if I can't go to Manchester this year, perhaps next year Manchester will have me there. All right, but thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Mark. This has been a ton of fun, and everyone should go check out the Liverpool Improv Festival if they can. But without further ado, this has been Muprov
Musings.
Oh, my sign off is was forced to judge my daughters and wife enchilada challenge that they set themselves to do, which became a lose-lose situation. But I found it very, very funny. So it was a nice end to a very, very long day.
And who won?
Well, I was diplomatic, so 1-1 on presentation and 1-1 on taste.
Of course.
There's always a right way out. Who won presentation? Who won taste, though?
But they wouldn't tell me who'd made what. They just went, oh. So I'm thinking. I think my Emma won taste and Izzy won presentation. So
Is this a regular tournament or no?
no, I came home and we were out the back with the dog, and then I heard this sort of like "Roar" in the kitchen. I was like, "What's going on?" And they went, "Yeah, we're having a cooking competition." I was like, "Well, why?" They went, Isabel just went, "Because," and I was like, "Okay." And then it was, "Boys, come downstairs." We came down to 2 enchiladas on a plate, and then they went, "You must taste them." And we were like, in my head, I was going, "Oh, this is just going to end badly." So they're giggling away, and I'm going, this is nice. And they went, "Which is tastier?" And I went, "Well, this one's tastier, and the presentation of this one is the best. So I think everyone's a winner in this situation." I was like, I was trying to work out, how I'm going to handle this.
I wish restaurants would do that. That sounds amazing to come back. And I love the idea of judging. I would love to sit down and have 2 waiters come out and bring me a plate and get to judge whichever one is better.
Yeah, I mean, any 2 restaurants could team up and do that right away.
I would pay double for it.
Maybe this would be like a food cage match.
Yeah.
Match those two things. Literally, see what I did there? Food pun. Match. I know, you could kind of like, it could be the start of a whole new Gordon Ramsay extravaganza, food mashup, the fight off the years or whatever. I don't know. They make anything these days if you pitch it.
It's true. You just got to get that, and you just got to keep asking and not.
I just love the pitch of Keanu. There's a bomb on a bus. Yeah, green lit.
That's all it takes.
Like you always did. Can't you see me now? I just wanna be with you. When the times they seem so crazy, can't you see me now? Can't you see me now? See me now. Can't you see me now? Can't you see me now? Can't you see me now? Everything is changing. Can't you see me now? Can't you see me now?